There's no way around it. In today's digital advertising world, we're tech-focused. The trend has been for brands and marketers to increasingly use technology to find the perfect audience. But what about the actual ad experience that's delivered to those targeted individuals, and how you present it to them, and why will they be receptive to it? Using algorithms and data layers to target the right person is important. But how do we ensure that the customer experience we deliver will really resonate? Hey everyone, I'm Noor Nasir, Senior Director of Media Innovations and Technology at Centro and host of Ad Tech Unfiltered. On this episode, we ask, how do you make ads that are really worth experiencing? Indianapolis-based integrated ad agency, The Basement, has built their business around making sure that the experiences they deliver are ones worth noting. Ira Maher is their VP of Business Intelligence. He ensures that customer experience is a focal point for every account they manage. Ira shares how he leads his team to consistently keep experience at the forefront of advertising and marketing executions. Our episode on how to make ads worth experiencing starts right now. So the topic of today is really going to focus in on this concept of experiential advertising. I know a lot of folks are very familiar with the idea of experiential marketing, but we specifically had talked about experiential advertising. So do you think you could share a definition of how you would paint what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thought and the way that we position it within our firm and with our clients is that we're executing a strategy to increase the intentionality of the advertising experience as part of the overall consumer experience with a brand. As tactics have increased in volume and complexity and ability, and we've gotten this granularity to performance at a very tactical, non-creative level. We feel like there's a really good opportunity to use that to enhance the consumer experience, in addition to focusing on kind of the metric performance, but also think about, as a consumer, how those touch points that are advertising, that are paid touch points, are truly part of the brand experience. That if I see a really bad advertisement for a brand inherently, or something that's just poorly executed, or there's, overlap or collision or all of these things, that is inherently representative of the brand. And so our focus is how do we take what we want that consumer journey to look like, and what we want the brand positioning to be, and extrapolate that into advertising, tactic, creative, and how we actually get the message where it is in that particular moment.
The funny thing about you saying that is, first things first, I have a sincere appreciation for the fact that you are consistently looking to adhere to that value set when approaching your client business. But additionally, I would hope that everybody who is in the advertising or agency game would be looking to do the same. But it's just crazy to me how often it seems that is not a part of the equation. There's been so many meetings I've been in where I can just sense a lot of people working on, let's say, a single account, and I can tell they all don't know who's working on what, why they've made the decisions they've made, and how that ultimately is something outside of the scope of just random tactics that have been glued together. Do you consider experiential advertising to be something that needs to be applied to every single type of account that you work across?
Yes. For myself and for our agency, we feel like you can't effectively deliver ultimate value to the customer if you're not thinking about as many, if not every single step of their experience in purchasing and using the product. So I'm bullish on the trend that the industry has really focused in on, of CX. And we've done a really good job, I think, of manifesting that in the digital destination environment, so a website or a landing page. And we've done a good job of beginning to translate that into the brick and mortar physical environment. So I think we're thinking a lot about that side, and we're thinking about how the organic content experience can enhance what the consumer feels. Then where the breakdown feels like it has occurred is, then we're putting these advertising messages out, and we might be super spot on with television, because television has inherently been that area where we can kind of tell a cool brand story and do it in a way that is aligned to a content. But unfortunately, as we get into some of the digital tactics, we're losing that, in our opinion. We're losing that opportunity that you have on Super Bowl Sunday to tell a super great brand story when everybody's paying attention, and they're paying attention almost as much for the advertising as they are for the content. And we get into a digital environment, and we get almost so focused on the metric side that we lose the CX side of it. And that's not to say that across every brand is screwing this up and, the environment is terrible. But I like to think of the paradigm that, there's been a growth of people adopting into ad blockers in their web browsers.
Yeah.
There's not the same correlation with people taking their bathroom breaks during the commercial breaks of the Super Bowl versus during the actual Super Bowl. And I think that's a way to think about that as an experience where the consumer is gladly accepting, and I would say largely because the advertising community has done a good job of delivering in that space. And if people are taking steps to try and minimize the visibility of advertising, that means that we're not necessarily getting it right. And so that's where the opportunity exists in a very tactical sense, in a pixel sense. As we approach the customer, back to your original question, if every person, whether that be in brand side, agency side, consultant side, is honed in on what the consumer experience is for the given segment, for the given product, then conceivably, even if you're executing in disparate areas, you're all laddering up to the consumer experience versus laddering up to exclusively a specific benchmark in the area that you have kind of defined as your scope of work. And that's where we're very passionate about focusing on what that is. Consumer experience leads to some sort of business outcome. Ideally, that's a growth business outcome. And if all those who are contributing to the process are thinking in that way, including in advertising, then obviously we would be successful.
The thing about the Super Bowl is that so much of the messaging is intended for the largest audience that could possibly be reached. Whereas a lot of clients that we work across, including you guys at the basement, are oftentimes looking for these super niche customers for whom kind of this blanket, holistic, super cool, sexy messaging may not have application. That's something I also was curious in terms of knowing that the ease with which somebody who's reaching, I don't know, like an 18 to 54, 18 to 60 type of market is something very different from when you have many different qualifiers on the audience you're seeking to reach.
It's a really, really great question. And I use the example of the Super Bowl largely to say that is the area where generally I think consumers and we as marketers have adopted that we're so open to advertising at that moment. Like just the groundwork that has been laid there, that in my mind is probably one of the most open areas where people are like, I'm going to go to the bathroom during the halftime show, but not miss the commercials. To your point about niche audience, I don't think that a niche audience means you have to sacrifice thinking of the consumer experience because it's more varied. And so you still have to be thoughtful too. If we're really only targeting an audience that, barely reaches into the hundreds of thousands of people who could potentially be converting on this one particular line. That doesn't mean that person doesn't have an appreciation for the experience or that some of the same things cross those niche audiences. So the change in how you're delivering the message and what the actual creative looks like is not as grandiose as it might be if we were shooting at one television commercial or another television commercial. We still want to be thinking about what does Noor care about in that moment, and how can we make both the reason she's seeing the ad, where she's seeing it, and what is being said as close to fulfilling that need in the moment as possible. And that's kind of our ethos. We have to be straight and transparent in engaging with clientele to say the likelihood that we're going to get 100% there very, very, very small. But if that's our stretch goal, for lack of a better word, then I think we're going in the right direction versus our stretch goal being what is the tiniest incrementalist, half of a fraction of a penny that we can change on this particular, against this particular benchmark of spend or whatever the case is. That's not to say those aren't important. But if we focus on what that consumer experience is as the guiding light, I feel like we're better suited to deliver.
So I wanted to lean into that last thing you just said in terms of guiding the customer experience. For any brand, whether they are a massive brand, a generalized general market, or somebody super niche, you have a large budget, a small budget, how do you guys approach going through figuring out how you're going to tackle your advertising strategy to encompass experiential advertising?
So we actually, as our agency has been adopting what we call the integrated operating model for us as an agency, we had to really spend a lot of time refocusing on how we initially engage with a new brand. Principally to your point, in the past, we would start by saying, okay, a brand is coming to us as an agency with a problem, and the problem is either we have a new product that we're bringing to market, or we have an existing product that needs new velocity or something along those lines. And we were jumping to what's the creative that we can execute and what are the tactics that we can execute that we believe from our experience give us the best chance of fulfilling that goal. When we sat back and said, okay, if we're really gonna go by the customer experience is our guiding light, then that's the first thing we need to do. And commonly, brand has thought through pretty thoroughly what their segmentation is. And they've got that person. It's Jane or it's Jack that is the persona that they are all very focused on. And they've likely spent a fair amount of time thinking about when Jane is on our website, what is she doing? And when Joe is in our store, or when Joe is using our product, or when Joe is contacting customer service, what does that look like? I think we spend a lot less time, and typically the brand has spent a lot less time thinking about how do we really carry Jane or Joe along whatever the buying cycle is, whether it's an hour or 6 months, with a really intentional advertising experience that is as thought out as what we've done to the UX on our website to make button color and size and space and location so fine-tuned to those personas. We need to be doing that with our display and with our search and with our social executions and with our out-of-home and with our television. I mean, we should be giving that the same level of focus, because typically that's the first touch point for the brand. And the likelihood is that they're going to have multiple touch points. It's not just perfecting whatever the last touch is to get the metric to the lowest possible point. That's great for us, but it might be giving us the wrong type of customers. It might be the Janes and Joes who aren't going to be repeat customers in the future. If we think about the advertising experience as part of getting us those best customers and treating them before they become our customer in the way we will treat them when they are our customer makes that experience for the customer all that much better.
I want to ask a question off of some of the things you just said as far as thinking about the experience on the website or what it's like when they're in a store location. When you are pitching or seeking new business or just figuring out the scope of work, are you from the jump off looking to make sure that you're going to have access to all those touch points so that you have that holistic and or aerial view so you can make good on your experiential intentions?
Yeah, so great question. We do, and that's been another way that we've had to change as an agency, is we understand that our scope of engagement is likely going to be a fraction of the total consumer experience. And we're very upfront in saying we would like, there's a whole set of things, a whole set of data sources that we would like it at minimum view access to, just so they can inform what we're doing. And where that becomes interesting is typically you have potentially multiple agencies who are contributing to things, who are contributing to different parts of that process, and can commonly be seen that ask of view access is predatory in nature.
Yeah.
And so we have to couch, especially with CMO or whomever the decision maker might be, brand side, to say we're fully understanding that this is our scope, but in order to be able to deliver, we want to know, for instance, what is that organic social experience that's being built for a customer? What is the email experience for the customer? When your emails are driven towards a promotion, what's the open rate like compared to when you have something that's kind of quirky or different in their journey? What are the time frames of a drip campaign that you're running in email, and how is that performing? Because really that should be what's informing us as we're looking at the overall consumer experience. We take the onus for mapping that, because that's going to be our guiding light. We hope that the brand and our client will adopt into that, and they typically do. And we hope that the other partners who are contributing will also understand that there's benefit to that. But we're going to take the responsibility of making and keeping it up to date, understanding how the various data sources, those that we might have under our scope and those that are coming from elsewhere, are contributing to the optimization of that experience over time. And ultimately, if we've mapped that experience, we've all delivered against it, but whatever the end outcome isn't changing. We're not increasing the unit velocity, or we're not, increasing revenue, or we're losing margin. Then we have to take the onus for going back and remapping what that is. We feel like that's our duty to our client.
Absolutely, right? I mean, that's, I guess, what the accountability comes down to, and finding satisfied clients. I feel in so many ways you have already addressed and or answered this question, but to circle back to it, you talked about asking for visibility into a variety of data points, at least view level, access to data, and then also the responsibility. Oftentimes agencies are working with other agencies. Have you ever encountered resistance, and what have you done to combat that resistance?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Like you're like, no, I've never experienced that.
We have, and I think it's not, to this point been a bad conversation, because there's a way to go about it where if we're coming to the table saying this is our scope, we'll share 100% of what we've done and what happens throughout that process, and open ourselves to the same level of accountability and vulnerability as we are asking of. Quite oftentimes it's, the IT department or the analytics department within a client instance. And we're saying we'll share 100% of this with you. We just want to know these couple of points, and this is how it's contributing. And when you can present it in the light of making sure that the customer experience from point A1 to Z29 is good, the logic leads to it being something that's very hard to resist. And so it's, we take responsibility for owning up if there's a mistake, or if there's something that's waning on our delivery. We want fellow agency or brand representative at any level to inquire and push us, and we hope that we'll have the audience to be able to do the same. Part of the good fortune of my day-to-day responsibility is to spend a lot of time in brand or agency summits or strategic planning types of environments. Those are quite commonly the times where there's 6 or 8, or in one instance we had recently there were 11 agencies who were contributing to a brand.
It's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
It is a lot. I don't think you would be surprised to know that one of the brand's goals is to reduce the quantity of agency partners
that they're working with. That sounds complicated.
And in this case in point, their metric for making some determinations on where the opportunities lie to reduce that number is those who are willing to be accountable, because they're building the same type of infrastructure that we're trying to evangelize. It's kind of why we're working with them. And so the summit I was specifically referencing, there were some partners who were fully transparent with the performance and walked up and said, we've really excelled in initiative A. And as a result of really excelling in initiative A, B hasn't done quite as well as we wanted this year. Here's what we're doing to do that. Or others, typically those who were underperforming, in my opinion, to the greatest extent, who just kind of glossed over and focused on the shiny thing that was, that wasn't specific to performance. And as it's kind of played out, those are the ones that are falling by the wayside.
Really interesting about you mentioning that expectation for accountability, which hopefully should always be there, but mysteriously often isn't. There is oftentimes a sense of mystery that comes with working, whether it's agencies or partnerships, and whatever, in whatever way they manifest themselves, as far as working with marketers or brands, that so many folks don't want to be accountable. And the truth of the matter is that when you are very open to transparency, it means you're really delivering on the promise of an agency, which is to offer fresh and exciting ideas, because those need to be coming in hot and fresh with regularity, and no series of, various tactical partnerships can make up for the great ideas that an agency can bring to the table.
100%. No single agency, ourselves included, have the corner on great ideas. And quite commonly, when we can bring to the table a set of skills and partner with somebody who has some complementary skills, we actually come up with ultimately something that's a lot better than if we were solely responsible, because it is inherently all a collection of minds. There are people who are better at a certain set of things, and there are agencies that are better set for a certain set of things. But it's the accumulation of that tends to win the day. And I think it's easier for me to say that because we're representing in the pantheos of agencies, a mid-size at best firm who work in a market that isn't it's top 25 but not top 5 market, and we're working quite commonly with brands that are in mid-consideration categories. It has to be an area where we're willing to partner and willing to play along with, whether it's a publisher, another agency, or a group of consultants that are contributing to a process. That's how we win. I think if I were coming to it from a solely media-focused agency or a big holding group, I probably would have a slightly different perception of that. It would probably be manifest in some of my partner agencies versus being more open to the wider marketplace, providing everyone is accountable and focused on the same goal. Where I feel like there tends to be a fair amount of friction when the agency value chain has a large quantity of contributors to a brand is the ability for any one of them to have a really sizable impact on whatever the brand's objective is minimized. And so inherently the focus of the agency becomes on the thing that they can control, which is that metric or metrics that support their particular tactic set. If those are important to the consumer experience, but not the ones that are the standout last touch contributor, it gets really, really, really difficult. And then your natural response as an agency representative is to defend that thing versus saying, we can contribute to X point. In our scope, we can contribute to X point. And we feel like if we contribute to X point, everybody else does these things, that will get us to our ultimate goal. We're going to hold ourselves accountable to the thing we can control, but we're on the team to hit whatever that objective is very clearly. And we know that we're vulnerable if we don't play along with the group to hit that goal. And I would be evangelical about that goal is connected to the consumer having a positive experience from A to Z.
So in terms of keeping that balance, knowing that ultimately we are being judged on metrics in varying capacities from an advertising perspective, how do you make sure that you aren't suddenly sliding down into a space where you're becoming tactic obsessed? How do you always bring it back? Is there a cadence that you do a check-in? What does that look like?
So we've had to establish this actually in our agency because inherently you got people who are delivering on different things in the agency. And so we've identified, and I don't know that we've really perfected this, a cadence of quarterly to sit down and revisit in the second meeting that we had with this customer, our client. We will have mapped out some sort of consumer experience at a very level, a very high level, and then worked our way down as the engagement has gone on. We have to use that quarterly check-in to say, all right, as a team, we've all been working on these disparate projects. There was the big website initiative that we had to deliver on. There was, completely rebuilding the, some sort of direct mail thing, and getting this giant thing put out in market and all these tactics. We've done well, or we haven't, where we've missed the ball. Are we still going towards what that thing was that we mapped out at the beginning? Then it's once we've achieved that cadence internally, we make that report out to the client. And in a couple of our client engagements, we're actually doing that monthly. We're having a more larger like agency focus event on a quarterly basis, but we're still holding ourselves accountable and presenting out client side monthly. That is a absolute work in process in our firm. And it's a work in process with our clients as well, because you have to put your all into whatever the initiative is that you're bringing to market in a given period of time.
How do you, when you're sustaining a client over, let's say, multiple years, how do you stay innovative when addressing the customer experience so that you're bringing something new and you're also showcasing you have an awareness of late breaking technologies and integrations that clients can take advantage of?
We try and position ourselves as technological and tactical innovators. And we have very good project management infrastructure in place that pushes each contributor to a client project on a given timeline, whatever's appropriate to that client, to come forward with new ideas in their space. Not necessarily, and this is the hard part, not new ideas that specifically adhere to what the budget has been or what the tech stack currently is, but bring forward the crazy, the new thing. And we feel if it inherently has really sizable value, even if it's disconnected from they're running on X CRM, and this tactic or this thing only exists in this other piece of software that doesn't play entirely well. We need to be the ones bringing that idea to the table and presenting some options for how we can either create something that's very close to it or find a way to make the technology work. But we really feel like that's our role. And the same is true creatively. So if our scope and the client's history has been largely in let's say television and radio, it doesn't mean that we can't bring a really cool direct mail concept to the table if it's good. And we might figure out that the thing that makes that direct mail campaign really good is something we could execute in the current tactic mix. Or we might find out it's really good and we believe that we can monetize it to the same extent that we're monetizing the tactics we are now. So it can be added easily to the mix.
Speaking of things in the media mix, I think this is probably less of an issue in today's world. We very much live in a digital-focused society. But are you ever encountering clients that still may have a resistance to adopting new digital opportunities because they've seen so much efficacy or value and just tradition in spending in traditional spaces? Or do you find that most clients have leaped over that fence?
Increasingly less, and I think there's a certain level of self-selection. I don't think our value proposition is as intriguing to a client that hasn't yet started, at least, to make that change. Sense. So I'm sure that those opinions exist quite broadly, and there are inherently, I think that attitude tends to be very present outside of the marketing operation within a brand, where if I don't see the ad on the Today Show, then are we really running advertising?
People are still asking those kinds of questions to this day with regularity.
If I search our brand name and somebody else, I see somebody else's ad, but I thought we were doing paid search.
Yeah.
So that inherently exists. I think the friction point that we are fighting most consistently now is because performance information is now so omnipresent and the marketing operation is being held to coming up with a dashboard of all of the activity and being able to report on these minute details, that performance information can tend to inadvertently skew opinions within the organization because it's being consumed by an audience that doesn't always have a full appreciation for precisely what they're looking at.
Yeah.
It makes the mix recommendation ultimately sometimes a harder sell because we're saying this is the consumer experience that we want to have for our consumer. These are the tactics that ladder up to make that a reality. And if the ones that are at the most awareness level are the ones that are the most expensive, and the ones that are at the intent level, if you haven't yet adopted into a full multi-touch model for the business, are the ones that are getting the greatest share of end delivery performance. Arguing for the spend at the other end becomes really, really difficult. Marketing operation inherently, when they go to finance, is going to say, look at the CPA that we are able to get on the search stuff. It is amazing. And finance is going, oh, okay, well, I'll keep writing a check for that. Great. And you do that to a certain point, and when there's nobody left in the intent bucket, then you go, fewer conversions and CPAs going up, but we've got to be able to spend at this full, for this full experience. And so that's, I think, more the friction that we're facing.
I know, again, like you just shared an example of thinking about the different touch points as it relates to the funnel experience for the consumer, or just getting people into the funnel at these various levels. But do you ever find that clients will say what you just said a moment ago as far as like cutting the check for the CPA piece and saying, well, can't you just execute the tactics where people just magically get to the bottom of the funnel? Like, can't you just find them? Can't you just use technology to find the ones that are already so far along so we can stop trying to get people into the top and wasting, I'm using air quotes that people can't see, to get people into the top and slowly get them to trickle down? I
would say greater than 50% of the difficult conversations are precisely around that. And I'm hopeful, as CX has become a real mantra within marketing, that will begin to bleed out into the greater organization, because when you couch it in that, it becomes a little bit easier to understand, I think, because it tends to be that the same person who's making that argument about CPA is also the same one that says, if I don't see it on the Today Show, is it really happening?
Isn't that just the irony of
it? So there's obviously a lot of educational opportunities, but the approach that I've taken, I don't pretend to think that this is the perfect one, is to try and answer the question specific to that person. I think marketing is one of the worst activities that you can do as a marketer. But if the person is saying, search CPA, why aren't we buying more search? And you ask them about the last time they purchased something themselves, or a family member purchased something, and what was that like? What did they do? Well, I was watching golf tournament on Sunday, and there was an ad, and I was sitting there and I Googled it, and then, then the crazy Facebook, all of a sudden I started getting ads on Facebook, and finally we were at Target the other day, and I bought it. Yeah. Okay, well, perfect illustration of the point. Let me help you understand how for our brand, that is a reality for a consumer. If the thing you purchased hadn't bought that ad during the golf tournament, would you have just magically wandered on to Amazon a month later and searched for that thing and then bought it?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Absolutely. I think it's a never-ending conversation, though. It's going to be a battle we'll always be fighting. So going back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, are a lot of brands doing a good job of doing a robust evaluation of who their audience is? Or in some instances, is it the reverse, where they're coming to you and saying, look, we have some sense that's Jane that we're going after. She's between 25 and 30, but actually we'd like you to get more details on her, and then also figure out how we can most effectively reach her?
That is a really, really good question. What we interact with a lot is this would be a tried and true thing that has existed in marketing, that we've established what these personas are. And because it's easy, we've made them we've chosen 2 or 3 of them. And we put their picture on the wall, and we put their picture in all the material for our internal group. And we always refer to them, in first person in meetings and things like that. And because that is a kind of fundamental part of what we do, we might be refreshing. We might be doing, if we're evolved in the consumer space, we're doing research against those personas on a regular basis. As an agency, we inherently, as we're running whatever tactic it might be, whether it's paid or organic, we're going to probably find something that either differs slightly or enhances whatever that persona is. And I tend to be surprised about the frequency with which that is met with a certain level of resistance. Well, but that's not Jane. I mean, do we really want those people?
So because
they're not the ones that were over here before when we did the segmentation research that the whole organization agreed was going to be the thing that worked. Our job then is to, in some cases, you might find that fraction, and they aren't as profitable. They might be one-time consumers who, when we were running, certain paid campaigns, they converted really quickly and they were really efficient and great. But as time plays on, Jane is right, and this person, this subsegment or new audience isn't. But all too commonly, they bring on new things. One of our longtime customers is in the home improvement space, and they had established segmentation. Whole company lived by it. Organizational structure was built around it. And as we got into market, especially with programmatic, we started discovering a lot of variance on top of that. Yeah. And it's been about 3 years of slow, iterative change to build that out. It hasn't been met with hard resistance. It's just, if you've been in your role for a period of time and you went through school at a time and you were educated on this being the way, it's just a little bit more difficult, not because you're resistant to it, it's just a little bit more difficult to understand how this advertising tactic or my organic social person is going to be bringing something that the big research firm that we hired didn't necessarily identify.
Yeah.
Being able to provide some data-backed validity to both sides of that argument should be the way to communicate it, and that's been where we've been effective. But don't know that it always wins.
Yeah. Well, fair enough on that. To shift the conversation to be a little bit more focused maybe on the programmatic / ad tech space. I know you were mentioning, television and so many different vehicles that we can reach consumers across, and also mentioning the Super Bowl as a space where we specifically can reach people in the most tantalizing way when they're most primed and receptive to that messaging. I think the thing about the digital space is that as much as we have an appreciation for the fact that more and more of our time spent with media is on digital devices, we simultaneously may also feel that, well, sometimes the digital experience isn't the sexiest experience. Mm-hmm. It's not what television once was, and we can't sell it through as easily. So how do you masterfully marry the art and science when bringing digital experiences to your clients on why they should be executed?
We, as an agency, we started with this mantra of trying to explain the nuance of it. So getting into some of the really specific details about the person whose hands on keyboard, what choices they're making about targeting and the build of the entire campaign, because we wanted to be evangelical about the value prop that we were bringing. The hours that are going into this campaign are making those choices. Yeah. Ultimately, what we feel like we've learned is it's very difficult for all audiences to a big pitch to understand those nuances, but just about all of them understand their experience as a consumer of a product. And if you're able to couch it in, this is the journey that we're creating, this is the experience that we're creating for that customer, and show visually, this is what, when the person's in an app, this is the way that manifests itself at this point in the journey. this is what their search experience might look like, and this is what their social experience might look like. When you can paint that picture and visualize it, it really, really helps. Then selling in some of the more tactical things, likely for a sub-audience client side that understands it. And we'd like to drop it in as we go. So we know that we want to serve Noor an ad for X product when we know for whatever reason that after she goes to the gym, it tends to be the time when she's most primed to be searching for this product or something like that. And so if we paint that picture to the client as, well, we're going to do location targeting on gyms, and it's a bullet point on a presentation that says location targeting on gyms or audience targeting based on frequent gym usage or something like that. That's good, but when you show the mobile phone on the screen with the ad, and they go out of the Mind Body app and into the ESPN app or the New York Times app or whatever the case may be, and you see brand advertisement there. And as you're presenting, you're speaking to, okay, Noor has left the gym and we're now giving her this is part of her experience. That makes it more tangible and better understood than the bullet point on the presentation. As we go, then we say, well, we've actually figured out that it's not right when she leaves the gym, but it tends to be like a few hours later or whatever. So we're making that change programmatically, and because the technology exists and is evolving so rapidly, there are more tiny little levers for us to pull to make that better. But trying to explain all of that nuance, I think, gets way in the way of what storytelling, and I mean storytelling in the agency or even brand advocate to the greater management team or something like that.
Yeah.
That is so much more effective because we all can feel it emotively. We don't have an emotive connection to that bullet point.
Absolutely.
But we do to the actual experience itself.
That's awesome. And I think every, agency can always improve on how do I better sell through taking something that seems really tech focused and making it something that really, when you extrapolate it down to the specifics, it's how you reach people in today's day and age. So,
and I think that I'm afraid my response there was almost even to callous and to undervalue the human power and ultimately now what Centro is evangelizing about the level to which you can automate some of those tiny little lever pulls.
Yeah.
There is just incredible value in that. It's not that the pitch has to exclude the fact that all of those decisions are being made, whether being made by person or computer or actualized by clicking a radio button or approving a recommended optimization within a platform. It's very, very difficult to sell just on that alone.
Yeah.
Because that is not how we experience it. It would be, the thing I've used in the past is it would be akin to trying to explain how a television signal goes in this circular space and I put my little antenna up and magically it goes through and they connect, and then on my television screen there's an advertisement. Right. And that sometimes the advertisement is there's a button in the control room where they're hitting, okay, go and play advertisement, and that file lives at the television station. If you tried to get into that to sell a Super Bowl commercial, you'd lose them long before.
Absolutely.
But if you show them it and you say, this is going to appear at this time in this person's life, it translates. And if you say our expertise is making that happen and making it happen as efficiently as possible, that should work.
That is a funny thing is that we just take for granted that for the most part, marketers and advertisers just already understand how TV works. That's an experience they're very bought into, but knowing that there are potentially millions of different digital experiences people are having. And I know people hate the word fragmented, but it is. It's just the digital space is wildly fragmented. And it's actually just now bleeding into all other types of media as well. So, great points there. So Ira, I think something that would be good to do is talk about some of the business that you're actually working on to whatever extent you're comfortable discussing it. And I'd like to know what might be some creative experiences you've brought to the table for clients that exist in digital ad formats.
Mm-hmm. So I referenced earlier a brand that we've been very proud to work with for a while, and that is again, low consideration category, but the Schlage Lock Company. So they, Walter Schlage was one of the pioneers of what we would now term kind of entry and exit security technology. His first patent, oddly enough, was one that connected a door opening and closing to lights turning on and off. And this is more than 100 years ago. Yeah. There's a level of innovation in the product space that you interact with that product on every single day. You trust it every night when you go to sleep that it's not going to let intruders in. But it's low consideration. We just don't think about it. We don't really care about it. So as we've really matured in our relationship with their brand, and as the team with whom we work has joined us in collaborating around making that consumer experience really special, we've been able to come up with some fun things. And quite fortunately, there's been a lot of innovation in their category, largely electronic innovation, to where I can now say, Alexa, please lock the front door. Or Alexa, show me on my Ring who is at the front door, and then unlock or definitely lock, keep locked, and arm stay my alarm system.
Yes.
And what we discovered along the way is there is a time when in that consumer experience where the product is the star, the physical product, be it on a door or in kind of a negative space, but that is not at the awareness level, because we've just come to know it, and we don't put a lot of care into it. But what we do care about is peace of mind when we go to sleep, and peace of mind when we're out of town, and all of our most important property, save ourselves and maybe our family, are there with us. That is an opportunity to speak about some of those really more brand ethos types of messages about peace of mind. So we thought through, we're attempting to get broad consumer adoption for this technological innovation of being able to say, Alexa, please lock my door, or have your phone when you're 1,000 miles from your house and check to confirm that your house is secure, and if for some reason it's not, effectively secure it in that moment. When you can meet a consumer when they're thinking about the need for security, remind them of that, and then show them truly how simple that interaction is, you can be really effective. Yeah. Persons at an airport means they're either leaving their family, the other members of their family, or all of their worldly possessions, save what fits in a suitcase, at home. That's an opportunity for us to engage with them in a slightly different way, to help them, remind them, you have that gut sinking feeling when you go, A, is the iron on, as my wife would say, also is her hair straightener on, and then third, did I lock the door? Right. It's such an inherent part of your everyday life that you start to forget about it. We can serve a message that says, is your front door locked? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But that's our time to say, if you had our product, you obviously would be able to know for sure that it was locked. Or maybe even make it that when you lock it, it arms your home security system, or changes the way your exterior home cameras work during that period of time. And you start to be able to paint that peace of mind picture in a really interesting way. And so those are the types of things that, in the case of Schlage and their parent Allegiant, they're a product manufacturing company. They live and breathe specifications, because those are the things that they are changing and innovating in. And being able to help the organization adopt into telling a story that doesn't negate the fact that those things exist, but tells it in a way that correlates to what the consumer experience needs, peace of mind, and control. That's what sells. And that's been a fun journey for us, both to discover some of those weird things that people may or may not care about, and how to communicate them in a way that enhances their overall peace of mind.
I think the funny thing there is what we might describe as what did you call it? You called it like low consideration or a low consideration category, is that ultimately when you're in the moment of being in the market to make some sort of purchase, it's suddenly very high consideration and it's much more important than you think it would have been because there are many other competitors in the marketplace. And I've been at Home Depot and a series of other stores suddenly saying like, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but I don't know which one I want. But suddenly the more information that can be brought to the table to inform my ability to make the selection that makes sense for me suddenly is very important.
Yeah.
And I think that's another nice thing about the advertising space is being able to push those messages in front of the right people who are ready to potentially make that purchase.
Yeah, in the case of Schlegg, we had to think about there's the journey of the person who's making a highly considered purchase decision. Either it's typically about their front door, what their neighbors and their visitors see, or in the technological space. This is where they're spending a little bit more time making a decision. Then there's a completely different journey for the husband at 11 o'clock at night who is at Lowe's because somebody broke the front door deadbolt off inadvertently, or it was there for a long time. And nobody can go to sleep, or he definitely can't go to sleep until that thing is back on the door.
Yeah.
And we can build an advertising experience for that person that is a common enough use scenario that there's an audience for it. And the way that we message the precise same things about the product is obviously vastly different. It's one screwdriver and the thing is in versus going with the borehole depth. But at 11 o'clock at night, when you're in the aisle at Lowe's, borehole depth is not what you're concerned about.
Not top of mind. No.
And so when we're doing to the earlier point about bullet point versus showing the advertisement, bullet point is using geo-targeting to serve messages to people who are physically in the aisle. Fortunately, the aisle layout of Lowe's and Home Depot are pretty consistent from store to store, so we can go broad around the whole thing in the parking lot, which was one that we figured persons sitting in their car trying too hard to, and you don't want to look like an idiot when you're in the aisle. Yeah. So you tend to be sitting out there looking for it and figuring out where it is in the store while you're still in your car.
Yeah.
Or we can go specifically to the aisle, and there might be a message to the parking lot, and there might be a message to the aisle. And when you show that visually and you tell that story of me being there at 11 o'clock and needing to make the decision, and that's when I need to know which of these installs in 10 minutes and which competitor almost requires a locksmith to put in place. That's a really great opportunity for us to serve a cool message, build a fun experience for that person that's a little bit different than what we show. We just maybe want a brand and a really high level positioning point when they're in aisle. At that point, 11 o'clock at night, it's single, you need a screwdriver. Do you have a Phillips head screwdriver?
In a world where automation and programmatic media and just digital information suggests that we're going to use technology to find the right person, we've already found them. How important is it to still offer them a meaningful customer experience when it seems that we've already, quote unquote, got them? I
think it's such a great articulation of the broad approach that we have. We take for granted too much that we have found them. That was such the battle. That was the solution to, I know that I'm wasting half of my advertising dollars, was just finding the people. Yeah. And that is definitely something you got to do, and you got to make sure that they're the right people. But I go back to my father's a sociologist. I came from a family that had such an appreciation for the differences, the way people experience the world, and how important individualism is, and how important emotion is to the way you go about living your life. If you completely ignore that person's emotion and what you are serving them with an advertising, with some messaging, and how you're trying to make a slight change in the way they think about the world, to just think that getting there was the battle and not think that delivering on that promise to your utmost ability in that moment is equally, if not of more importance now, is really to kind of forego the meaning of really great advertising. It would be to say, I'll go back to the Super Bowl. I know that I've got 90 million people. Well, if I just run my logo for 30 seconds, and that's it, or I don't, or I just deliver a really crappy ad, then I've wasted a number of millions of dollars in that moment. Same with programmatic and the ability to automate all the delivery and some of the decisioning that goes into that. That's so wonderful. And it does give us the ability to increase the efficiency of delivery of that message. Now we're there. We're in the room to pitch. Now we got to pitch. And so the pitch has to be reflective of where we are. You can't, if I'm in 300 by 250, that we need to do our best to kill that 300 by 250. And DCO and some of the other evolution in our ability to increase output creatively gives us a lot better of a chance to make that the best experience. It doesn't have to be entirely a manual process. And to me, that's the oil that's going to keep this, I should say, that's the wind energy that's going to keep this working and really keep us pushing towards new and different things, because we are making the process more efficient. And so we can no longer have the excuse of we didn't find the person. We're there. Now we've got to deliver.
Well, Ira, I have a deep appreciation for the approach that both you and the rest of the team at The Basement takes to considering the user experience every time when you put together advertising plans. So I hope you have inspired listeners to just be even more accountable. I think people look to always do this, but they may not always be doing it. And just like, working out or any other type of behavior you want to adopt, experience is absolutely essential. So thank you for chatting with us about it.
Thank you. If I worked out as frequently as I evangelize experiential advertising, I would look a lot different than I do now. But thank you.
So that was our episode on how to make ads worth experiencing. Thanks to Ira Maher of The Basement for sharing vivid illustrations on how to breathe new life into ads through experience. Too often people, even those of us working in advertising, operate under the assumption that ads are a nuisance only intended for blocking. While the ad industry acknowledges that this behavior is taking place, they've wrongfully come to expect it. And that expectation might compromise the intentionality and effort with which advertisers are building out worthwhile user experiences. If the ads reach the right people at the right place and time with an experience that's of consequence to them, I'd argue that the recipients would be leaning in to learn more and not looking away. That's it for this episode. I'm your host, Noor Nasir. We'll catch you next time for more AdTech Unfiltered.